Well, thank you, Annie, and thanks for the invitation to come here and talk about the Automotive ISAC. It's exciting today to actually have two members of our board of the ISAC here. I am John Allen, Annie said, the acting executive director. And we'll share a little bit of what's actually happened with the ISAC, where we're going next, and some activities actually happened since we became fully operational in January. Excited to have two really active members of the board here, Jeff Massimilla. Jeff is the Product Development Security Chief Information Officer for General Motors. He's actually our Vice Chairman of the ISAC and actually was part of the initial conversations a year ago to get the ISAC up and running. He's been a real active member. I think what's interesting about Jeff and about Henry as well is both started on the product development side, really weren't cybersecurity people and electrical engineering backgrounds and have really now led the industry around vehicle cybersecurity. And then Henry Bizet, who is a part of Kia North America Infotainment Technology. Again, 7 years at Kia, great experience around vehicle cybersecurity and the connected vehicle. Spent time a number of years with Ford Motor Company before coming to Kia. And again, one of our board members has been very active and exciting to have both of them. For those who don't know, what is an ISAC? So I'm not going to pretend that everybody in the audience knows what an ISAC is. An ISAC stands for Information Sharing Analysis Center. And so the ISAC concept was enabled in 1998 by a presidential decision directed by President Clinton to allow industries to share information about threats and vulnerabilities to really help protect the critical infrastructure of the United States. And initially in 98, it was much more around physical security. And then we realized around the mid-2000s that really it was about cyber. Adversaries were really hitting us from a cyber perspective. And what's fascinating about the Automotive ISAC is you look at many ISACs from financial services, oil and gas, retail. Financial services has been around for a while, but you look at some of the newer ISACs, they all occurred after a major cyber attack. It was after something happened. Whereas the automotive industry in 2014 realized, you know what, with connected vehicle, an autonomous vehicle on the horizon, we got to start to collaborate. We got to start addressing this vehicle cybersecurity issue early, and came together, and let's just say having all the automakers in a room and encouraging information sharing and collaboration was definitely a cultural shift for this industry. But over 6 months, they did come together, came with a prospectus, and last year these gentlemen, the board, came together and said, you know what, we're going to move forward. And in July of last year announced we're going to have an Information Sharing Analysis Center. Took a while for it to set up. The first intel reports were shared in December, and then fully operational in January. And the focus of the ISAC, and these gentlemen will talk about it, is really that central collaboration point around threats within the vehicle ecosystem and the vulnerabilities, sharing vulnerabilities that's happening to the connected vehicle. And so we're pretty new, we're pretty young, but there's been a lot of activities which we're going to share here in just a moment. And I'll start with Jeff Massimilla. I mean, Jeff, how's it going? And we've given updates before. I mean, what's been going on? How's the ISAC actually moving forward here?
Yeah, no, thanks, John. Great introduction to the ISAC. And actually, the ISAC is going great. So I think as John pointed out, I mean, first of all, the fact that we have this thing set up and we're operational before a major cyber event is very, very good. And as John said too also, this is the first time that the auto industry has really collaborated at this level in a non-competitive fashion. So it was a cultural shift, I think, for all the automakers that came to the room. But generally, how's it going? I mean, we hit initial operating capability in January of this year. So, less than 6 months after we decided we were really going to do this and we started the activities to get it done, we hit initial operating capability. And what does that mean? So that means we were sharing threat and intelligence information with each other. We were sharing vulnerability information with each other. We've had automakers submit vulnerability information along with third-party vulnerability or intelligence information. So that's all great initial operating capability. The other thing that we've seen is we've seen the automakers really fully get engaged. So we've decided as an Auto ISAC to take on things beyond just vulnerability and threat intelligence information, and we'll talk about that later, but I'll allude to it here. The automakers have come together and put together a mission to put best practices for the automotive industry for cybersecurity. This is a great activity. All automakers are fully engaged. We have the help of our partner and acting executive director company, Booz Allen Hamilton. And we have the support of a lot of different associations out there to help make sure these things are what they need to be. So that's another great activity. And the ISAC is thinking about taking on other things, and we'll talk about those at another time. But I think the other thing that we're doing is we're coming up to a pivotal point here in the ISAC because we're trying to replace our executive director, John Allen, with a permanent executive director. So this is a pivotal point for the ISAC where we're going to staff this thing with all of our full-time people. We need to make sure we keep a good focus on that threat intelligence, sharing information, and as well as the best practices activity and our future maturity that we'll do. So all is well, from my perspective.
It's great. Henry, why is it important to collaborate? Why should this industry collaborate right now? What's so critical about this?
Well, it's the power of the collective. I mean, in terms of when dealing with a situation, you have adverse effect of cybersecurity or other issues or concerns with the industry. The power of the collective and pulling our intellectual properties together and minds, this is how we're going to battle back and fight this situation that we're dealing with. There are a lot of examples I think you alluded to earlier, how the auto industry comes together. So I think it comes together when it matters the most. We're competitors, obviously. We're all competing for the same customer in many ways. But essentially, we are pragmatic, and we find ways to work together to collaborate and have answers for the things that matters the most. So safety, the V2V, the V2X effort, for example. This is an example where the automakers can come together, the SAE standards. And this one here, the cybersecurity, has been an amazing ride so far. We made great progress trusting each other. I mean, that's really important because we all taking bits and pieces of this space and going with it and essentially providing this back to the collective. And it shows how great of an effort has been so far.
How do you, to continue on that thread, Henry, I mean, how has the ISAC been able to create a culture of trust? It's a question for both you and Jeff. Yeah. I mean, there was a real sensitivity at the beginning that if I share information, I'm going to give away trade secrets. I'm going to give away my crown jewels. How is that culture of trust evolving? I know it's continuing, but how is that culture of trust started?
Well, basically, you have to put it in perspective. What we're trying to get done here. We have a common goal, right? Once you reach or converge on this common goal, I think everything starts to fall into place. And also, I think the ISAC has done a good job from a leadership perspective, bringing the OEMs together and essentially erasing away a lot of these concerns about, am I sharing enough? Am I not sharing enough? So really credit to you guys. You've done a great job of bringing us together. And we've, so far, being on the calls and listening to everybody talk, genuinely everybody's interested in making sure that we reach the end goal of providing better security and better best practices for all our collective. So I would say it's been a great effort so far.
So Jeff, with that, I mean, how active are you guys in the ISAC? Is this more of a paper drill, or I mean, how much of your time as leaders, I mean, are you involved with the ISAC right now?
Yeah, do you mean from a GM perspective?
From a GM, well, as a vice chairman of the ISAC, and from a GM perspective, I mean, is this just...
So significant amount of time, right? I mean, in my organization, we have a couple people who are strictly dedicated to the ISAC activities. So whether it's threat intelligence, gathering, sharing and disseminating vulnerability information, working on the best practices. I mean, these are full-time jobs. So, myself personally, a significant amount of time. And I mean, I can turn that question back on you, John. We spend a lot of time to try to get, and I think Henry, you talked about it perfectly. What's the common goal? If you have a common goal, then you immediately begin to establish trust in the sense that you're organized toward a common goal. But really, what has happened is as people have started to share vulnerability information. There's a couple automakers that have stepped up and shared things early, and that creates that trust and a level of comfort with everybody else that says, oh, there wasn't any repercussions for them sharing that information. And that's really important because had those initial sharings maybe not gone in the right way, there could have been some challenges that we faced.
Great. So Henry, I mean, to that point, I mean, what about when an incident actually occurs? I mean, how does Kia look at using the ISAC and even your own internal processes? Who else do you collaborate? So it's really two questions. How do you use the ISAC if an incident occurred with Kia? And then what other, since this is a panel about collaboration, external collaboration, what other industries do you look at to collaborate with during an incident?
Well, the threat that the industry is faced with is something that is recent. Let's be realistic, right? It's something that we did not really think about years ago or decades ago because we weren't worried about hacking or the possibilities there. And this created within the companies the organization, right? Organizational structure around battling this cybersecurity issues and so forth. And so in terms of how we deal with it, we had to really go back to the drawing board and assess every organizational aspect of our company. And in our case, we're a global company. We have distributed in R&D centers and capabilities across the world. I mean, Europe and Korea and the US. So imagine the complexity of the situation in terms of dealing with this, especially with the Auto-ISAC being a US-based entity. And so in terms of how we deal with it, if there's a concern, if there's an issue, we have our dedicated full teams that support the ISAC in terms of communicating back to the ISAC or bringing back from the ISAC information or monitoring threats or so forth. So it's really about communication and putting in place the organizational structure, dedicated organizational structure. It cannot be a part-time job. Cybersecurity is not a part-time job. And this is a new way of thinking, and you would find, I think all our members have done a great job of putting together or put in place dedicated resources to support this effort.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Maybe I'll hit the collaboration one if you don't
sure.
mind.
Go for it.
Because I think that's I joke about that often, whether it's in my own organization or externally. I didn't lock my organization into like a room with whiteboards and go, all right, define a cybersecurity strategy and let's go execute it, because that's not what cybersecurity is about, right? It's all about collaboration. So whether it's about information sharing or technical solutions, I mean, collaboration in this industry, in the cybersecurity space, within the automotive industry, occurs also outside of the automotive industry. So whether it's, from a GM perspective, the defense industry, the aerospace industry, consumer electronics, we're all facing the same threats, and really we have all kind of the same types of solutions that we're trying to protect. So there's a lot of collaboration there, and then you get outside of that area and you have whether it's universities from work that they're trying to do, and we're trying to create abilities to pull in new resources and talented people into the organization, or NHTSA, DOT, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA. I mean, the Navy, the Army. It's amazing when you start to get outward in this space, and we all, again. Now we talk about the ISAC having a common goal. We all have a common goal, and the common goal is to protect our infrastructure. So when we go to that level, it's amazing the amount of collaboration that you can do.
So with that, I mean, there's a concern at the beginning that the government would have access to the ISAC information. The government, NHTSA, would be controlling what we're talking about.
Sure.
How much of a heavy hand has NHTSA or the executive, other parts of the executive branch, or legislative branch for that matter? We've had a number of hearings. How much has our government been involved with the ISAC?
I'll take that one if you want, Henry. You can
go ahead.
Do it. Yeah. They've been very involved as a very good and strong partner in the ISAC, and I think that's really important to say. They have a lot of interest in what we're doing, especially NHTSA and the Department of Transportation, and there's other ones, also a lot of different other agencies that have a lot of interest. But obviously NHTSA is our regulator. That's an important thing, that we all accept as an automotive industry. But they haven't come in with a heavy hand and said, you will do this, or we will sit in your board meetings, or anything to that extent. They are all about collaborating, understanding what the ISAC is doing. Again, I think they have a common goal, just like the automotive industry, and that's the safety of our customers, right? Privacy of their data, safety of our customers. So a very, very good partnership.
Great. Anything to add on that, Henry, at all? How
No,
have you seen their involvement?
It's been really a great partnership with the government on all levels. I think we have this tendency to view the government in a negative light for some reason, but when it comes to, again, the things that matter most to all of us, we come together and pragmatically find ways to say, hey, how can I help you? Right. Rather than, I'm not going to monitor or watch what you're doing and make sure you're doing it right. But it's been a very good relationship with DOT, NHTSA, and so forth.
And personally, I think I've been surprised. We've been drugged to the hill a couple times. And luckily, we haven't had to be a witness, but we have briefed members of Congress. Yeah. And what I've been really surprised is the maturity of their understanding of the subject area and their involvement with it. No longer is it a proud moment to say I haven't touched email in 4 years or 5 years or ever as a member of Congress. Yeah. And the questions we received, I think when we're up on the Hill, have been real mature and advanced. And the support we saw from some of the committees, I was really impressed with over the past few months. So which is great.
Great point.
Most of this conference is made up of suppliers. So what's the plan? We had our first supplier join us a few weeks ago, Delphi. We'll have an announcement here in the next few days of 4 more that have just joined us, which I will not give away that one until we do the official press release. But how is that working? I mean, how do you envision how important is the supplier community to the ISAC, and then how do we envision plugging them in?
I can take that one. I mean,
Yeah.
the suppliers, essentially, really the partners. That's how I call them. They're critical to the whole equation because they do a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, if you think about, from a product development perspective, the vehicle comes together, at the OEM assembly plant, but the components that go into the car are co-designed and work together with the engineers at the tier 1s and 2s and 3s and so forth. And so if you imagine the cybersecurity threat and you have a software hardware platform that is being built at that level, you have some level of autonomy as a tier 1, for example, to design the internals of a head unit or an ECU. You definitely have to have that engagement and the intellectual participation of the supply base and the partners. So therefore, you could battle these threats better and take on. It's again the power of the collective. The more intellectual capability and the more pooling of resources to take this on, this is how you're going to win. Are we going to ever resolve it 100%? It's an evolution. It's continuous. But the more minds and brains around this, especially at the supply base where there's a lot of talent, I think it's important.
So I'm going to turn a question on to you, John, as our executive director, since we employ you as the Auto-ISAC. So I'm going to hit the elephant in the room.
Yep.
Why did it take so long?
Yeah,
to get the suppliers engaged?
It's a great question, and as we talked about at the beginning of the panel, it's really building that culture of trust. So we took it as a phased approach. As you can imagine, trying to get 14, now 15 automakers in a room together to trust each other and share information. And you say it takes so long. We're in month 4 right now, so I think we actually sped up the supplier program. Initially, when we had our first meetings and we built the prospectus, it was about a year. Like, hey, let's get established. Let's talk across automakers. And this was like the first couple meetings. Quickly, I'd say by July of August last year, the board went, no, we got to get the suppliers in quicker. There's such a critical part of our ecosystem. So established, fully operational in January, had our board meetings, really our first 3 or 4 board meetings. And there's a pretty serious vetting process to bring suppliers on. The purpose of the ISAC and bringing suppliers on isn't a business development platform. To be able to, how do I get to GM, how do I get to Kia to show what I can sell? It is really to be part of that ecosystem of sharing the threats and vulnerabilities. And so as we look at the suppliers coming in, having that conversation, we actually had a supplier day with a couple tier 1s, had to really protect the information from an NDA perspective because we were discussing some threats and vulnerabilities. So taking so long, part of it was we actually sped it up, quite honestly, and now we're starting to see momentum. I really feel by the end of June, we'll have anywhere from 8 to 10 suppliers, and we'll have our first, we call it the affiliate program. We'll have our affiliate board meeting with the members here within the next month is what we're aiming for.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks. But if members in this room are struggling with their leadership to make a business case of why join the ISAC. So we've talked to a number of suppliers lately, and they got to carry this back to their own leadership team and say, hey, we really should be a part of this thing. What's the business case? Why do it? Why, as a supplier, should I be involved in this thing to begin with?
You cannot afford not to, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is so simple, black and white. I don't think you need a business case, to be honest with you. So it takes leadership and takes vision and looking forward and being part of the solution, right? Is the business case. It's that simple.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'll add, it's an industry problem, and this is an industry solution. So, if you're part of the industry solution, I would actually, I'd argue that probably a number of companies don't have threat intelligence gathering information similar to what the ISAC provides. So, first of all, you get that just by joining the ISAC. The sharing of vulnerabilities, I mean, what other forum, and you can have close relationships with other suppliers or other OEMs, you start facing something in your environment, you don't stop and go, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to pick up the phone and dial up 30 different people and call them and tell them, hey, I'm facing this, just in case you're seeing it too, right? This is the way that we do this once. You can do it very expeditiously. You can get it into the ISAC and everybody sees it right away, and then we all benefit, right? So if we all benefit, we can all look in our environment and say, yes, I'm facing this, or no, I'm not facing this, or maybe I just learn from what they are facing of how to do something differently. Beyond that, I mean, the best practices activity, we have, the collective industry has so much talent, and the only way that we're going to leverage that talent is if we all work together. And in the area of best practices, that's where we need to get this talent engaged. If we all create best practices together, voluntarily sign up to meet those best practices, and then actually execute that within our organization, we'll be in a much better spot.
That's a good pivot point now. Talk about best practices. So some of you in the room may remember the framework for automotive cybersecurity. Best practices came out around the Detroit Auto Show. It was in January. Global and Auto Alliance and Global released them in conjunction with the ISAC. The ISAC endorsed it, and then the ISAC took the best practices and ended up doing the collaboration. I mean, how much effort has been put into the best practices effort, so far? And I can answer that, but I'm going to let them. I'm going to let you answer it. And then, really, I mean, is this something that the industry is going to be able to get behind? And then back on the government question, how does the government feel about it? How does NHTSA feel about the best practices effort? I mean, at the end of the day. So, I mean, Henry, what's your opinion as you've seen the evolution of best practices in the meeting? I mean, how active has the ISAC been with this?
Well, sure. I mean, if you just step back a little bit and focus on the question of what did it take? Yeah. It took a lot. I mean, in terms of a project or an exercise, bringing the whole company together, right, in the various aspects of how do we come up with these best practices, that alone was a major undertaking because you're involving so many organizations. You're talking about manufacturing, product development, R&D, supply chain, procurement. The whole entire operational pieces of the company had to come together and provide feedback. And so it was, for us personally, it was a major effort, and we had to really kind of like think about this eye-opening experience, like, wow, this is really important. In terms of taking those best practices and sharing those with the team, it is like a give and take, right? So we also are receiving back, the investment of time and effort that we put towards those best practices from the other OEMs and our team members. So it's been good.
So what are those statistics, John?
We're about, I think,
hours?
1,000 man-hours since January. At least 1,000 man-hours have actually gone into the best practices. And then, when we have the meetings once a week, it's all of your people and many times you on the phone. The ISAC's open location is in Washington, D.C. at an innovation center. We purposely put it in an innovation center. I'm overdressed actually right now to be in the ISAC. We wanted to be kind of more innovative when we did it, and that's where we meet. And I'm real impressed. We have standing room only at times for those meetings that last 3 hours. But from your perspective, how much effort have you put into it, Jeff and GM?
Yeah, significant effort. And the other elephant in the room is, if we spend 1,000 man-hours, then where's the results of that work, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
The best practices effort is a lot of background effort. It's a lot of effort to get everything organized and everybody putting their best effort into what a best practice would look like. And then you start to collate around what those best practices will look like to be released. And we'll be talking about that here in the relative near future for the output of that, or the initial output, and how that will transcend. But yeah, I mean, within my organization, I mean, we've developed best practices. So it's all about taking those and then learning from everything that everybody else is putting our input in. It's a huge effort. It's great.
Great.
It's great.
So we have a couple questions that are coming from the world of social media or Twitter. So let's look at a few questions and see. We got it. Annie, are you going to help us facilitate, or am I going to look over my shoulder and answer them?
I think they're right in front of you.
Oh, there. Wow, look at that. Oh, technology, gotta love it.
All right.
So a high one here is, are Google and Tesla part of the Auto-ISAC? So to be direct, we have 98% of the vehicles on the road are members of the Auto-ISAC. And obviously, as we look at the supplier base and expand the suppliers, overall, I mean, Google is a major component within that supply, especially with the relationship they just had with FCA. So ironically, we're in discussions with Google right now. As I announced, the first supplier that has joined has been Delphi, and we'll have an announcement soon of other suppliers joining. There'll also be a public-facing website that will come out within the next few weeks, which will have the logo of all of the members who agree to be publicly known. Right now, we don't publicly acknowledge all of the members of the ISAC. But when we have the logos up on the public website, you'll see many of the members who have agreed to be publicly. So I've kind of stepped around that question a little bit, but we're going to publicly, in about the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll be able to have it on our website out for everybody to see. Okay. I guess the next one, what does, well, 3, but a jump. Somebody else won. Using the GPAC as an example, how did the ISAC respond organizationally? How well did it work out? Jeff, how did it go?
Well, so I mean, so the Jeep research. I'm gonna avoid the word that's up there because I think it was research. It was good research. But the Jeep research was obviously something that happened when the Auto-ISAC was actually not actually an initial operating capability. But maybe what I would do is let's give an example of how that would happen today, and we can divorce it from FCA and talk about any OEM research as an example. So. The way that this is supposed to work, and the way that I can say it would work if it was General Motors is, if we received any information through maybe our coordinated disclosure program, or somebody reached out to us in any other way, we would take in that information and then immediately begin processing it. We'd stand up some sort of an incident response activity. Once you process that information, if you find that there's validity to that information, we would immediately then start to share what we have with the ISAC. So we wouldn't actually try to assess it and understand it to its entirety. We would share that we have some information in our environment. This is what we're seeing, and what does that mean to other member companies? They can start to disseminate what we're sharing. As we went through our incident response activity and understood what actually happened and what we were going to do about it, we would then begin to or continue to update the Auto-ISAC vulnerability sharing information so that other automakers were totally on top of exactly what we learned. So that's organizationally how the ISAC should work, using an example of research or hack.
I think people need to, when the ISAC was being formed, the GPAC actually occurred as we were developing the ISAC. So there wasn't that intel feed, there wasn't that conduit, but I can tell you it helped get people to focus and really double down on it. That and also some legislation that came out last summer helped. So there were a number of points that actually, and it's ironic because if you look at the timeline, I think people think that the ISAC was created because of those events last summer, and we were very much meeting on a weekly basis at that point. It was definitely a point of discussion to talk about, kind of rewind the movie a little bit, and if that was to happen again, how will we actually do it? But that leads to another question. How does the researcher community in the future, as we look at the different areas, we have the core automakers, we have the suppliers, and then we have a strategic partnership program such as Global and the Alliance as part of the strategic partnership program. How do you envision the future researchers talk to the ISAC?
I mean, I would say that we have to open up a forum for the research to come in. And it could be at the OEM level, but I think it really would help to get it more on the aggregate level. So that way, the research that's being done, whether it's independent, whether it's academia or what have you, there's got to be a forum within the ISAC that people can come in with case studies or proposals or ideas or findings in which we can discuss all as an aggregate and as a team. So that's how I'd see things from a research perspective.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that, I would say, I think it's best if it comes in at the OEM level, because the OEM then can understand the research and actually provide some sort of analysis. So ISAC, Information Sharing Analysis Center. Yeah. So analysis is important. If it comes in through the OEM, then they can analyze and provide better information. But I agree, Henry. I mean, I don't know that all OEMs will have a coordinated disclosure program. And if they don't, we got to give researchers the ability to go into the ISAC for those that don't have that.
And we kind of joke that we kind of want to be the Hague. We want to be the safe place that researchers can come to if you're having issues or challenges reaching somebody. And on the public-facing website that's going to come out will be the way to get a hold of the Intel analyst, to get a hold of the executive director, and we really do want to be part of that, that central hub. So to close out, I'm going to let you guys have the last comments. What's the future? What is going to be success in a year from now, number one? And really, what do you envision here, the next big thing for the ISAC? So how do we measure success in a year and the next big thing, Henry?
Well, this is definitely an indefinite journey. There's no way we're going to be able to reach a point to say, we've done it, it's complete. If we do that, we're going to fool ourselves, because as fast as we're moving and trying to pull our resources together and battle cybersecurity concerns, there are hackers out there who are very smart and who is going to continue to try. That's the reality, and therefore, never declare success as we have arrived. We've reached the conclusion, we've reached the point in which everything is completely in a safe zone. So you have that mentality, you always have this self-fear that's going to drive you. And I hate to say it that way, but it is. And it's a continuous journey, and then we have to continue to do this indefinitely until something else happens, right? But the future, you have to have some level of concern about the future, right? Because you definitely don't want to be in a situation in which a threat has occurred. And this is something that keeps all of us, awake at night. worrying about it. And, but I think the collective and working together, we'll do our best to mitigate the risk. And that's all we can do is mitigate.
Thanks. Jeff, in 20 seconds, what do you think success is going to look like? What do you want in the future?
Sure. I mean, success is continuing to mature, as Henry said, continuing to get the best practices done, share vulnerability information. You know, the next big thing is firing you and getting our permanent executive director and then doing the right transition plan to make that happen.
Great.
So, but that's an important step for the ISAC as well, is to really make sure that we get a permanent operating model that's sustainable and continues on our maturity. So
brilliant. And on that note, I'll update my LinkedIn profile. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much for the panel members, and thank you for the questions. All right.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.